So we are in this sermon series on the book of Revelation, and I want to take a minute to catch you up because some things have been happening, and I want you to notice a little theme that shows up, a little trick that John plays again and again and again. So we started this sermon series at the very beginning of Revelation where John meets Jesus, meets Christ, who tells him, I was alive, and then I was dead, and now I'm alive forever, and I hold the keys to death and Hades in my hand. And that was our reminder that even in this strange and terrible book, Christ is at the center. And the Christ who is at the center is the Christ who we know. This is not some strange new guy showing up with the same title who acts entirely different from the Christ who we encounter in the Gospels and in worship and in prayer. It is the Christ who we know, who came into the world for the sake of the world. Then we skipped a little montage, and we found John in the throne room of heaven, God holding a scroll that was sealed with 7 seals and worrying that no one would be worthy to open this scroll, to get this show on the road to bring the world to its end. And John heard about the Lion of Judah who was going to come and open the scroll. The Lion of Judah with sharp fangs and terrible claws and a mighty roar. And then John turned and saw the Lamb who had been slaughtered for the sake of the world. And was told that it was this Lamb who had come into the world for the sake of the world, who was worthy of opening the scroll. Then we skipped the opening of the scroll, but the scroll was opened, and with every seal that was broken, terrible things came to the world. Terrible, awful destruction came to the world, and people were cowering, hiding in caves, asking the mountains to fall on them and save them from the wrath of the Lamb, as though that makes sense. And John heard about this remnant who would be saved, these 144,000 people who would get out alive, and then turned and saw a multitude so great it could not be counted from every land and nation and language. Do you see the trick? John sets us up with these big cinematic pieces, these big bits of destruction, these expectations about power, and then pulls the rug out from under us and reminds us of the Christ who we know. The Christ who was slaughtered for the sake of the world, who saves many. Salvation is not stingy. Liberation is not little. Redemption is not runtish. Now we have skipped another big cinematic bit. After the scroll, there were trumpets. 7 seals on the scroll, 7 angels with 7 trumpets. There's a theme going on. And as the angels have blown these trumpets, more destruction has come to the world. And that is such a hard thing to reconcile with the Christ who we know. So we need to put this bit that we're skipping in context, because it's going to be important for understanding the bit that we read, this strange thing about a strange scroll that tastes good in the mouth and sour in the stomach. When those 7 seals were broken, one of the seals caused a group of martyrs under the throne of God to cry out for justice, to cry out for revenge, to cry out for those people who had hurt them to get what is coming to them. And it is easy to read the book of Revelation to imagine the end of creation through the lens of revenge. It is a theme that we actually see through Scripture. There are psalms that talk about making sure that the wicked get what is coming to them. The Gospel of Luke is obsessed with the idea of a great reversal. The poor and hungry being filled up, the rich being sent away empty. There is this idea that justice is just turning things around, so that I, who have been wronged, who have righteous grievances, get my reward, and those people who caused me to have righteous grievances, who hurt me and harmed me, get what is coming to them. There is this idea that justice is revenge. If you want to see that in action outside of the Bible, there is this book called The Apocalypse of Peter. It is the first Christian writing where we see heaven and hell, where Peter is taken and shown these things, and it is the first one where hell is full of ironic punishments, of people reaping the seeds that they planted in life. And there's even this idea amongst the early Christian church, amongst the church fathers, amongst the doctors of the church, amongst these important people, that one of the consolations of heaven is that the righteous, the saved, the liberated, the redeemed get to look into the ironic punishments of hell and take joy in the fact that those who tormented them in life are getting what is coming to them. We like revenge. Humans like revenge. The powers of sin and death and everything that makes life less love revenge. It can feel so right. It is easy to read the book of Revelation through that lens. But there's a scholar, Adela Collins, if I'm remembering the name correctly, there is a scholar who says, and I think she's right, the book of Revelation is ultimately a hopeful book. That is what this series is going for. The book of Revelation is ultimately a hopeful book. But it makes room. It makes room for that human impulse. It makes room for those powers of sin and death and everything that makes life less within us. It makes room for our fantasy. Our fantasy that somehow revenge is justice. And so we get these bits. We get these people crying out for the justice that looks like revenge, or for the revenge that looks like justice, that they think is justice. And then we get these trumpets bringing destruction to the world, making sure that those people get what's coming to them. And then, right before the final trumpet, right before the mystery of God is announced, there is a pause. There is a break. Everything stops. Because it turns out that revenge is not how God works. Let me be clear. Again, I get the impulse. I understand what it is to want to look at somebody who has wronged me and see them be wronged in return. And I am sure that there are people in this world, people in this church, maybe even people in this room who occasionally look at me and say, "You have wronged me. I would like to see you be wronged in return." I know that there are entire movements in this country rooted in the idea of a grievance and revenge for the grievance, of making sure that the right people get hurt. I understand the impulse. But I am here to tell you, and I am going to tell you, and I'm going to say again and again and again and again and again that God does not do revenge. I say that because of Scripture, And I say that because if God does revenge, if God gives us all what we deserve, if God is going to give me what I have earned, I am in a lot of trouble. Because I have hurt people. I have hurt people in this world. I've hurt people in this church. I've probably hurt people in this room. And if I had to take all of that on, if I had to be hurt in turn for every way that I had harmed someone, for every way that I had dishonored the image of God in others and in myself, there is no way I could bear that. It would be impossible. I would have no hope. But I have heard, and I have seen, and I have faith, and I know that God does not do revenge, that God does not pay us back for what we have done, that God, who is love, has come into the world as one of us to live the life we could not live, to love the love we could not love, and even when we nailed him to a cross and laid him in a tomb, God got up and stepped out into the garden, said, "I'm not done with you yet." Christ did not come to the world to condemn it, but to redeem it, to restore it, to free it, to save it. And that includes all of you, and that includes me, and that includes everyone. So what do we do with this weird little scroll and this strange little moment where John hears thunders and is told not to write down what they said, and is handed this scroll and told to eat it? What is this scroll? I think it might be that idea that justice and revenge are the same thing. That tastes good in the mouth. That is a brilliant fantasy when I can cut out the implications and just make sure that the people who I am mad at right now are getting right what is coming to them. It tastes good in the mouth. But when we see it, when we encounter it, when we live it in all of its fullness and in all of the consequences that that bears for us, it is sour in the stomach. It is horrifying. It is not something that the God who is love could possibly do, because if God did that, God could not be the God of love. It is not something that Christ could do, because if Christ did that, then Christ would not have come into the world to redeem it, but to destroy it. It cannot be justice, because then justice is monstrous, because justice is then unacceptable. God does not do revenge. And the justice of God is not destruction, but mercy. Let me say that again, especially today. The justice of God is not destruction. It is not revenge. It is not hatred. It is mercy. That is what God is offering. That is what God keeps offering. That is what God keeps asking for. Here is mercy, be merciful. Here is mercy, embrace mercy. Here is mercy, know that God has mercy on you. And when you taste that sweetness of revenge in your mouth, know that if you accept it, if you swallow revenge, it will destroy you. It will ruin you. It will turn your stomach. But if you take the cup of blessing, if you take the cup of mercy, if you take what God is actually offering, it will not only taste sweet in the mouth, but it will fill you. It will sate you. It will make things better. And that is what I think we are being offered here. That warning. Do not accept revenge, but accept mercy. Accept grace, and let that overflow into the world until all of the world knows that there is mercy and grace. Until all of the world knows that there is redemption and salvation and liberation. Violence. The violence of God, the violence that we so often expect, is a fantasy. The reality is the reign of love for all. Thanks be to God.